morning.
Hey, good morning, Bishop Coffey. How are you?
I'm doing great. Good morning, everybody. I'm Bishop Joe Coffey, an auxiliary bishop with the Military Archdiocese, coming to you from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, city of brotherly love. So I'm very, very pleased to be able to speak today with a very good friend and someone who I've admired for many, many years now, Mr. Chris Bell. So Chris, welcome. Good to see you.
Well, I'm honored to be with you, Bishop Coffey. You're a great leader and a great example for all of us.
Thank you very, very much. So Chris, I'm sure many listeners know all about you, but some may not. So can you give us a little bit of a bio and tell us like where you're from and a little bit of information about you?
Sure. I grew up on Long Island, nice working middle-class family, if you will, in Elmont, and went to school in Connecticut for journalism. And there I learned that not every family was so happy and together. I heard about runaway kids, abandoned kids in New York City, and I went to live and work there in a prayer community in Times Square. And the first person I met walking into this shelter that was on 8th Avenue was a young mother with a baby. And when I saw her, and I was really taken aback because I didn't imagine anybody would come in with a baby. I said, "Why are you here?" And she said, "Well, Chris, when I found out I was pregnant, I was happy and I thought I'd move into my own apartment. My life would be different. It would be better. But when I told my boyfriend, the father of the child, he told me where to go to get rid of this thing." And she said, "I felt so alone and depressed. I even thought about taking my life. But I realized I had a baby and the baby was innocent." Now, this was a teenage girl. This was 1979. It was a long time ago. And then she looked at me and she said, "Can you help me? Can you help us?" Now, this shelter was temporary. It was like a crash pad. And when I started to ask, I was new there, where does a mother go with her baby? I found out her only practical option was a welfare hotel, run down, rat infested. It was really a drug den. And I thought, shouldn't there be more for women and children, young women and children? Isn't it women and children first? And I turned later to a priest friend of mine I had recently met, Father Benedict Groeschel. He was, God rest his soul, Franciscan with the robe and the rope for a belt, also a psychologist. And I said, "Why doesn't somebody do something to help women and children?" And he looked at me, stroking his beard, and said, "Well, if you're going to complain about something so much, maybe you ought to do something about it." And then he said, "I'll help you." And that was terrifying because it sounded like the voice of God saying, "Do something here." Right. And I prayed about it and thought, if God was asking me to do this kind of ministry to help mothers and babies on a long-term basis, he would help me through, that the valley of despair and the mountain of diapers that I imagined and whatever else would come. So in 1985, with the help of Father Benedict, we opened up a former convent, converted it to take in mothers and babies. And
what were you doing for those years between 79 and 85?
I was there in Times Square, and I was watching more and more young women coming in. And some of them were coming in from Long Island, where I grew up. I just couldn't imagine there were that many young girls. And I wasn't, I wasn't pro-abortion, but I wasn't actively pro-life. I know you were raised in a family, it was in your DNA, and right. And that was just there. And my dear wife, Joan, from the moment she heard about Roe v. Wade, she was trying to stop it. But for me, it was just, it was bad. Abortion was bad, but I wasn't active at all. And I hadn't even signed a petition in high school or college or anything. So we opened this home in Hoboken, and the first mother who comes in, she really taught me even more that I needed to know. And maybe a lot of listeners, this is really an old story, but in 79, it was completely new to me. And I'll tell you today, it's still true, as we know, and it's even worse, even with the Dobbs decision saying, abortion is not a constitutional right. It's even worse in states like New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Connecticut. So Debbie was her name. She came in with a little boy, Bobby, just born. And she said, this isn't the first time I became pregnant. When I was in high school, I first became pregnant, and my mother told me we have to take care of this problem. And my mother took me to Planned Parenthood. And she didn't know then, and I really was clueless, that Planned Parenthood's main mission, its whole reason, is to either prevent or kill as many children as possible to decrease the population. It's total eugenics. But I didn't know that. She didn't know that. She said her mother took her there. And now this is 1985. She's telling me this. Today, you can go online and hear these undercover recorded videos of Planned Parenthood workers today saying the same lies to women in the same situation. And Debbie said, the first thing she said, would it hurt? I never had an operation. And they said, no, it's just a little blob. And, you'll feel some cramps, but you can go back to school. You'll never think about it again.
Big lie.
Nothing. And they continue to say that. And people, people today believe, educated people think, well, it's so small, it's nothing. Not knowing that by the time a woman confirms her pregnancy at 18 to 21 days after conception, that heart is already beating. Right. And that heart is not going to stop until that little life or our lives stop. It just starts at 18 to 21. It just keeps on going. And I heard an OBGYN tell me years ago, there's more growth and development in every human being the first 30 days of life, from conception to day 30, than at any other time in your life, because all the cells are multiplying at a rapid rate and differentiating. And that's why you have arms and legs and fingers and toes. By 6 to 8 weeks, you could see the little, it's a tiny, tiny person. After that, it just grows bigger and bigger and bigger. So Debbie told me that, and then she said, after the operation, I started to scream. And I was yelling, I killed my baby.
Oh, boy.
And they were telling me, to be quiet. They were going to put me out in the hall, and I couldn't, and they did. And then she asked me 2 questions at that time that I did not know how to answer. The first was, where do you think my baby is now? And I didn't know what to say to her. I'd never thought of the question. And then she asked, what do I tell people when they see me with Bobby? They say, is he your first? Is he your only child? She says, I know now, when I was 9 weeks pregnant and went in for that operation, that was a baby. And if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have done then what I did.
Right.
So, and the second mom who came in, she had a very similar situation, except she wasn't taken by her mother to a Planned Parenthood. She was taken by a friend of the family. Because again, as you know, in New York and New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and too many other states, you as a young girl who's pregnant do not need your parents' permission. And why is that so? And people who hear that, they don't believe it. Parents don't believe it, because you can't get, your ears pierced without your parents' permission.
You can't get an aspirin in school.
No, but the school counselor, the school nurse, the school teacher can take your child for an abortion. And why? Because the state legislators have voted to, or not voted to, protect parental rights. They just allow it to happen. So our representatives are going against parents in a big way, and they've been doing this for decades. And because parents don't know about it. They're not making a big hue and cry as they should, as any good parents would want to. Yeah.
Right. So tell me more about that first house. How'd you come up with the name Good Counsel, and how'd you get the house? And tell a little bit about that first one.
Yeah. So, the convent was empty, and I found out through people that I worked with at the shelter in Times Square. And when I went to the pastor, he was a Franciscan priest, a good Franciscan, also not the same community as Father Benedict's, but he said, you move in and you do, and do your good work. He says, and don't worry, you'll have enough problems. He charged me very little rent, and he gave me his blessing, and we just opened the doors. And it happened to be at St. Francis Parish. So I think St. Francis was really looking out over us in the beginning. But before I found that convent, I had been living in Brooklyn for 3 months at the parish of Our Lady of Good Counsel in Bedford-Stuyvesant, trying to raise the money to renovate their convent. But at that time, that convent needed $500,000 worth of renovations. And in 1985, I had just started. I had spoken at my first parish on Long Island to tell them about a home I wanted to start for mothers and babies. And I came back with $4,000, which was a lot of money at that time to raise from a parish. Right. But I knew I wasn't going to get $500,000 anytime soon. So I started to look for a building that needed less renovations, and God led me to Hoboken.
Good.
It also happened to be the same parish where Frank Sinatra was baptized.
Wow.
And I've got a little Frank Sinatra story if you'd like to hear it.
Sure.
Bill Reel, God rest his soul, he was a columnist for the Daily News, and he would write columns about people in need, people who would help, people who were down and out and had turned their lives around. But he heard me speak at a high school where his son was going to school on Staten Island. And he said, I want to know more about what you're doing. So he came to Hoboken, and I told him, how we got started, just like I told you. It's funny. I remember getting a phone call while he was in the house from my first godson, and he just wanted to tell me, that he had joined the baseball team and how happy he was and excited. And then Bill wrote a story. It was Mother's Day weekend. He said, who gives a home for mothers, who are homeless on Mother's Day? And it just so happened that Frank Sinatra read the story.
Wow.
Now, so I'm in the basement of this convent in Hoboken, and I pick up the call, and a woman says, will you please hold for Frank Sinatra? Now, I thought that she was either kidding or it was the real deal.
Yeah.
So, this is the days you get put on hold, and I'm standing there or sitting holding the phone for a minute, and then he says, hey, Chris, how you doing? In that very familiar Sinatra voice, and
wow.
I was fall over. Well, he tells me that he was in this convent because he went to school around the corner, and that's where the nuns lived. I didn't ask him whether he was in the convent because they dragged him by his ear, because he did something wrong.
Detention.
Or if he was helping them out. But he was rather jovial about the whole thing. And then he asked me, so what do you need? And at that time, I said, it costs us about $10,000 a month to run the home, to pay a little stipend to the staff, to the food, and, and very little rent, but, to keep things going. And he said, well, I'm going to send you a gift, but don't you tell anybody.
Wow.
I feel even a little guilty telling you now, but I have to share the rest of the story. So right after he hangs up, I get a call from Bill Reel, and Bill says, hey, have you gotten any calls today? And I says, now I feel I can't say anything. I says, well, yeah, I've gotten a few. Your article, which is true. It generated a lot of interest, and many people sent in donations after reading that Bill Reel column. And then he's fishing around a little bit. He realizes I'm not being straight with him. So he finally says, did you hear from Frank Sinatra? And I said, well, what makes you ask? He says, well, I got a call from him wanting to know how to get in touch with you. And, are you the real deal? Is that how he put it? And I said, well, Bill, because he called you, I'll tell you he did. He reached out to me, but he said not to tell anybody. Oh, so Bill was kind of miffed. And he says, oh, you're kidding me. Oh, this would be so great. Well, there's more to the story. A year later, there was this woman who wrote the unauthorized biographies of all these stars. And if you know anything about Frank Sinatra, besides his singing and his great career, he had what you'd call a checkered past, right, Bishop?
My mother loved his voice.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
She said he was one of the few people she could understand every note he said.
He was a real ballad singer, and he was proud of that. He was proud of that. And my mom liked him too. And that's one of the things I said to him. My mother would be thrilled to know that I'm talking to you.
Right.
Well, this woman writes this unauthorized biography, and it's filled with all his sins and peccadillos and every piece of dirt she could dig up. Right. It's nothing to be proud of. Well, Bill calls me up and says, Chris, I won't use your name. I won't use your organization, but I want, to say that I know Frank Sinatra is really very generous, because he did send me a $10,000 check.
Nice.
And I said, Bill, I know your heart's in the right place, and it certainly would be a good counterbalance to this terrible publicity. But I do think that God is going to use this and help him out spiritually, to suffer silently for the calumny that's being foisted against him. And again, Bill grumbled a lot, but he didn't write anything about it. And you may know this too. Frank Sinatra reconciled with the church. Whatever marriages he had to do. He had a chapel in his private place, his mansion out in California. And, he wanted to be right with God, because, as you know, you can have the world. And certainly he did have the world at his feet, publicity, celebrity, money, what could he ask for? But deep down in his heart, he was a Catholic school kid, and he wanted to do what's right. And please God, he's with the Lord right now. So a couple of years after that, Frank died. And right after he died, Bill Reel wrote the whole story up. And so that's why I feel I could share it now, because it became public knowledge, not because of me. But still pray for his soul. That's what we do, right? And thank God for him. But between Bill Reel and Frank Sinatra, many people have donated to Good Counsel. You can find out more about us at goodcounselhomes.org. That's Counsel, Counsel, homes with an S at the end of it, .org. And if anybody listening to us knows a woman in a crisis pregnancy, because we have 4 homes today in New York and New Jersey, but we take women from all over. You can go to Good Counsel Homes. You can go online. Any woman can find one of 230 maternity homes throughout the United States. She can go to her state and look up a place where she can find help closer to her, or she can call our helpline. It's a 24/7 helpline, 1-800-723-8331. And I'll certainly repeat that again later. So we are here to help any pregnant mom in need. So it's, regardless of her immigration status, her mental health, her addiction issues. Many of our women are in domestic violence situations. That's why they're there. And why do we have such a horrible situation in the country right now? Because for decades, we've been telling women, you don't have to have your baby. And what message does that give to men? It's like, I don't have to take responsibility. You can just, I'll pay for your abortion. And that's it. No long-term care. I didn't want a baby anyway. I just wanted to have fun. So this is what we're teaching in the schools. This is why it's so important to really, we have to convert the public school education system. It's vile. throughout the country, as we've seen in places, like little old Virginia, or whether you're in New Hampshire, out in Colorado. These local school districts, they are teaching our kids amoral sexual information that does not benefit them. And it just has been getting worse and worse over the decades. Mm-hmm. It's unimaginable.
Right. Chris, can you talk a little bit more about your relationship with Father Benedict? Because I've known Father Benedict also, and I had great respect for him, but I'm sure some of the listeners really don't know much about him or his relationship with you and Good Counsel.
So I met him when I was living and working in Times Square, and then he became my spiritual director. And from there, we, opened up the Good Counsel homes. He was chairman of the board till the end of his life. Many people know, he was on EWTN for many years, and being a trained psychologist and having that experience, what I found in him was not only a mentor and a guide, but a man who understood God and understood other people. And he was extremely patient and tolerant and compassionate. Not that he was, if you will, giving away the truth, but to help people take the next good step. And that was one of his expressions, that you take it to heart for yourself, and you also take it to heart for others. And it gives me today just a little more insight into who God our Father is. God our Father loves us so much, and I know you know this too, and growing up in your family, it was also, I think, instilled in you. God, he made us, he knows our foibles. Jesus, our brother, lived with us and suffered with us, and is still here with us in the Eucharist, and through the Holy Spirit is inspiring us to take one good step after the other. So waking up every day, knowing I'm not going to have a perfect day. I'm not going to always be as patient as I should be, as kind, but to try to be a little bit better. And when I do fall and fail, to just go to the Lord and say, I'm sorry. And also go to my brother and sister and apologize. So what have the mothers of Good Counsel taught me? And again, it's through Father Benedict, being encouraging and patient, because, we have women come in, they don't even know what it is to have a father. If the father, if they know his name, they don't know him as a man to talk to and who cares about you. You and I mean, we had loving parents. There was never a doubt that if I was ever in trouble, I could go home. As a teenage boy, I realized, I didn't, but I could commit murder and my father would forgive me, which sometimes isn't so good for a teenage boy to know, because I trusted him a lot, as a boy. And Father Benedict allowed me to realize, God takes us right here. You look at the moms, they have so little coming in the door. They didn't have a father. Their mother in their hour of need is saying, I can't help you. The father of their child, the man who helped them conceive a baby, turns their back on them as if they're dirt. I mean, I really, even now, after all these years, can't imagine how lonely, how rejected, how depressed that can make somebody feel, because I've never felt that. I couldn't feel that because I have people in my life who've always cared for me and loved me. So taking a mom who comes in the door like that, she may be irritable, she may be angry, she may want to take out all her frustrations, on me, on the staff. And what is she really doing? She's really exhibiting her pain. And what does Christ ask you and me to do? And I know you've done this at the doors of Planned Parenthood. I've seen you do it. Whether it's a woman going in or a staff member coming out and screaming and yelling, they're sharing a pain they're carrying because they don't know that God loves them and God could help them right now and forever. And good counsel is trying to be a little bit of that light. And Father Benedict said, this is a work of God that you're doing.
Would you get involved with the day-to-day at all, or visit, or mainly just fundraising for you?
Well, he as chairman, he certainly did a lot of fundraising, but he came into the homes, and in the beginning we had religious sisters, and he would help them understand how the mothers are different, because being formed as a nun, you don't get the particular formation of dealing with angry, desperate pregnant moms. But it was very interesting, he would say, because the women, and I see this even today, where there's even less religion, if you will, in our society, and where people see fewer nuns in habits. I see that mothers who, they're certainly not Catholic. Most of our women are not Catholic, but they have a respect for a woman who has made a commitment to Jesus Christ, even if they don't know who Jesus Christ is, and is living a pure life, or trying to live a pure and prayerful life. And it's a respect, it's almost an awe. It doesn't mean the moms don't get angry with nuns, but there's still this high respect for them, which again makes me think it's encouraging to see a man of the cloth, in the cloth, a woman who's wearing her habit. It's a great example. And Father Benedict encouraged us to open a home specifically for moms who have mental illnesses. In the very beginning, I have to confess, I realized it was too difficult, or I said it was too difficult to take a mom out of a psych unit, or to take a mom who I knew had a psychiatric problem. But he said, we should do something special for them. And so we opened up what we called our Daystar Home. And it was just for moms who have mental health issues. And what we learned there, we now have moved out to all of our homes. And I'm trying to encourage other maternity homes to do the same thing. And what is that? It's very simple. The first rule is change your expectations. Change the idea that a mom, when she comes into our home, we say usually, you're going to go back to school, you're going to find a job, we'll help you do that, we'll connect you with that. Many women take home health aid certificate courses. It just takes a couple of months. They could do that during their pregnancy. After they give birth, we give them a couple of months so they can bond with their baby, and then they'll go out and work. And where does their baby go? We offer them free daycare. I'll tell you a quick story. Up in the Bronx, I was showing another priest friend around, and it was 8 p.m. on a Friday night, and there were kids in our daycare. And little Destiny, she came running up to me, and I grabbed her and I held her over my head and kind of shook her, and she was giggling, and I put her down. And then she saw Father George, in his collar, and she just ran over to him and she leapt into his arms. And at that moment, I realized that's what Jesus meant when he said, you have to have the faith like a little child. Destiny had no concern, no thought, no question that Father George would grab her and hold her safely and take care of her. Now, she saw a few priests, in our home. They come in to celebrate Mass once a month, but she didn't know Father George, and it's just that total abandonment. And isn't that what God the Father wants us to do? Just jump in his arms and put everything there and have no concern. Solanus Casey, he said, thank God ahead of time. Padre Pio, pray, hope, and don't worry. That's great faith, and that's what we're called to do. Now, you may wonder, first of all, why do we have kids at 8 p.m. on a Friday night? This is pre-pandemic, but our moms work evenings and weekends, and so they're we're babysitting their kids, we're watching them so they can do the work they need to do to take that next good step, right? Save a little money, right, get things together, move into their own apartment. And then we went upstairs. and there was another mom, Chandra, and she was getting dinner a little late. Usually they all eat dinner together, but she worked late. She's putting her meal together. She looked a little tired. So I say, well, at least tomorrow, it's Saturday, you can sleep in. And she looked at me, she said, oh no, I have to work tomorrow too. But she said it with a smile on her face. Well, the year before, when she came into our home, she wasn't smiling. In fact, she was quite angry and quite depressed because when she announced to the father of her 3-year-old, whom she already had, of course, that she's pregnant again, he kicked her in the stomach. And she was so angry and so upset when she came to us that she didn't know if she wanted to have this baby. Well, of course, we encouraged her. We told her we can get her a job. And she did take a home health aid certificate program during her pregnancy. And she gave birth to a little boy. So now she had a girl and a boy. And she really liked working with the elderly and the sick. And that night she said to me, you know, I like it so much. I think when I leave Good Counsel, I might go back to school and try to become a nurse, because I think this is something I have a facility for. So, as you know, new life, even when it seems like a crisis, and I see this every day in so many different moms, they come in, they're worried, they don't know how they're going to survive with a baby, whether they have another child already or not. They're lost. But that life really brings a new life to them. And for some of them, it brings them into a new life with Christ. You know, we share with them at Bible study, again, taking women where they are. What's the next step? You know, how do they know God? What do they think of him? You know, God as Father is sometimes really hard to accept. But we, you know, just take them and allow them to pray. It's so interesting at the end of usually these Bible studies, we just ask him to ask God or for help, or just pray and thank him for whatever you want. And they are certainly grateful for the help that people give, because they know that we're not run by the government, and that everything that Good Counsel is and how it survives is on donations. And they usually ask God to bless them, their child, and the other moms in the house, and other women who are in their situation. They have very generous hearts, really generous hearts. And so they deepen their faith in their own way. I was talking to a mom just the other day. She's been a Muslim for a year, she says. But, you know, she participated in our Bible study and was as active as everybody else. And she prayed for everybody, knowing that we're praying, you know, as Christians. So it was, you know, there's an ecumenical nature here that you can't imagine.
Yeah. Have you had some women say to you, well, I would like to learn more about the Catholic faith?
Oh, yeah. So every year we have not only a number of babies baptized, but we have mothers baptized. And not only mothers baptized, but some of them who maybe were baptized, whether Catholic or in another faith, and they want to learn more about the Catholic faith, and they receive their first communion, confession. So again, take the next good step. What did Jesus really did that, right? Whether it's the woman at the well, or even the Pharisees, he was always trying to teach them what, you know, guys, wake up here, you know, God, the Father is not asking you to just live by the letter of the law. Look at the Spirit. You know, so it's Father Benedict's influence, which I should mention. We have a book about Father Benedict called Taking Heaven. And if you like the book, or if you're interested in it, you can go on Amazon and order it. But Taking Heaven are interviews with different people who knew Father Benedict, besides myself, Mother Mary Agnes Donovan, who is head of the Sisters of Life, Father Andrew Apostoli, his own blood sister, Marjoule Drury, and it's just a lot of different facets and insights into a man and a priest who was known worldwide on his talks on EWTN. He had a weekly program, and he wrote more than 40 books. And you get a personal view of Father Benedict and an insight
Right.
into his, some of his next good steps there. So I hope.
Did Cardinal O'Connor get involved at all with Good Counsel? And how about the Sisters of Life? Do they get involved now?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So from the beginning, the Sisters of Life started, in 1992. And Cardinal O'Connor asked Joan, my wife, and I to talk to them. So we talked with the first group of postulants who are now,
Wow.
sisters over 25 years, and some of the sisters before they became sisters, they were working at Good Counsel in our home.
Nice.
They found their vocation. I feel very blessed to have been a little part of that. In their formation. And yes, to this day, they do have a home in Midtown Manhattan, and they take, a few women, but they know that we could take any women, and we never are full. How do we do that? Because if a mom comes to us in need and every bedroom is occupied, we will take her and put her on the couch. We'll pull out a cot in the office. We've even used the chapel to have to mom stay. One time in our South Jersey home, mom, she wasn't Catholic, but she was in the chapel, and the house manager was feeling so bad. Every day the house manager would go in and say, "I'm sorry, a room may open up." One mom is planning to move out, but the rent, the apartment isn't ready. And by the third day apologizing, the mom said, "Will you stop apologizing? I like it here. It's peaceful." And like I say, she wasn't Catholic, but I think truly she felt the peace of the Blessed Sacrament. And
She didn't know she was alone.
Yeah, she wasn't alone. She wasn't alone, So, yeah, it's again, Father Benedict having that Franciscan spirituality teaches you to welcome and help in any way you can.
Right. So your first home was in Hoboken. How long were you there before you opened your second home, and where was that?
Yeah. So it was just a little more than a year later. Our second home was in Spring Valley, New York. And that home continues to exist. And then the third home was opened also within 2 years on Staten Island at what was St. Mary's Parish in Rosebank. And the first three homes were identical in this sense. They were private homes that were donated to the parish. They turned them into convents. So the nuns moved in a little more plumbing, sinks in each room, and maybe a gang stall, if you will, for the bathroom. And they had a little chapel. So what was really nice is that there was a homey atmosphere, right? It was a house. And then it had the spaces to add extra women to it. And even though they were small, they were just enough so we could have a bed, a crib, and a dresser for each mom and each baby. Yeah.
So they can stay up until their baby's born, and then a little afterwards to get on their feet.
We tell a mom when she comes in, you can stay a year. So some women come in, during the first trimester, but most come in closer to the third. So, and we're not rigid about that year. But the reason we say you have 1 year is so that she starts thinking, I better get moving here, whether it's school.
Right.
We give her tests to see where her educational level is. Half the moms have a high school education, but of those, maybe half of them, their reading and math levels are really a little low. So we test those out. We get them some remedial help. For moms where English is a second language, will help them. It's not only moms we've had who are Spanish speaking, we've had women who are Chinese, Portuguese, Italian. They've come from all over. And then, of course, try to get them on a track to get into a job that could be more sustaining. Of course, retail is available. Fast food restaurants, it's good to start there. But home health aides, that certificate, they could get much better pay. It could become a longer term track for them. And some women, have finished high school. They've started college. We've actually had a medical doctor, believe it or not. In our home, we've had social workers, believe it or not, women with degrees, for different reasons. They've been abandoned, they're in transition, they lost their job, their apartment. We'll help anybody. And you know, the moms, sometimes they form a really tight-knit community among themselves. They support one another. You talk about, you know, growing in the faith. There have been times when we have a deacon or a priest who becomes a regular visitor in the homes. Of course, we invite them in. It's not always easy because you clergy are so busy these days doing good things. And that when we have that happen, there's really a special bond that forms, and we see more baptisms happen when we have a deacon or a priest coming in regularly into the house.
So, Chris, do you have people that volunteer regularly for, and what kind of duties do they have there?
Oh, very good question. Yeah, we do have volunteers. We have life skill programs that either the staff or a volunteer will teach. Now, some of that volunteer work could be teaching a skill that a person particularly has, whether it's cooking or sewing or resume writing, or we have social skills classes, which is just to help, you know, refine some of the what, you know, you'd learn in your family if you ate dinner with your family regularly. Most of our moms rarely sat down together, or sometimes never sat down together with other people in their family to have a meal. So part of our routine is that you have to come to dinner, and one night of the week or 2 nights of the week, you're going to be the cook. So the moms, you know, cook, of course, you know, we're there helping prepare with them. One mom early on, I remember she said, "Oh, I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to cook." So the staff member said, "All right, so we're going to make sandwiches." It took so much time and energy making the sandwiches that the next time she said, "You know, I know a little bit." And she started making meals, and she was a great cook. And it's just like that with prayer. We say, you know, we don't force anybody to pray. But at dinner time, you say, "Hey, would you like to say grace?" You know, whoever cooks, you say the grace. You know, and the mom who says, "Oh, I've never prayed. I don't know how to pray." You say, "Well, we'll just give it a try." And she's usually the one who goes on and on and on, thanking God, thanking everybody who helped her, thanking, you know, the Lord for, you know, just being here. So, you know, we all need an opportunity, don't we, Coffey, you know, just to share what the gifts we have.
And then as far as the staff, is there always like a staff mother in charge? And are they 24/7? Or what is your staffing needs?
Yeah. Well, we do need good staff. So if anybody's interested, you know, please go to goodcounselhomes.org. And again, I should mention the helpline, 1-800-723-8331. It's 800-723-8331. That's for any mom who needs help, and anybody who's interested in working or volunteering at Good Counsel or supporting us. Go to goodcounselhomes.org. It's counsel, COUNSEL, homes with an S at the end of it.org. We certainly can be found on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. You can, you know, see our stories there, hear the moms talk. And again, if you're interested in Father Benedict, the book about Father Benedict, Target Heaven, well, you can write us at goodcounselhomes.org. Or you can go to Amazon and look up Target Heaven. And the book was written by Good Counsel staff, or edited, I should say, with all these great interviews of people who knew Father Benedict on a very personal level. So yeah.
Is there always a person in charge at each home?
Yeah, so we have a house manager who oversees the home in general, and then we have resident advisors. And I have to say, you don't have to be a social worker. You don't have to have a degree in psychology. We have teachers, of course, nurses, and we have people who work for the Metropolitan Transit Association, people who managed at Home Depot, people who've worked in very different backgrounds. It does help, maybe if you've been a mother or a grandmother, but it really helps. What's most important is that you love mothers and you want to love women who are in desperate situations. and you have a compassionate heart. Those are the keys that I look for, no matter what your educational or your experiential background has been.
Do you interview everybody, Chris?
Not anymore. We have more than 70 full-time staff.
Wow.
But we do have managers. We have a 24/7 helpline. I mentioned that, and that's those staff too. They work diligently and long hours, and they're always ready to pick up the phone. We're looking for more hearts and hands to share what the Lord has given you to share with others who are in need and have not been given maybe what you've been given, or maybe you've had a tough life. I mean, we have staff who are single moms too. We have staff who've, been through the ringer, but when God has touched your heart, your life changes. And probably the most important gift that the Lord gives each one of us when our heart changes is that we want to give that gift to others. And
Chris, can you just take a few moments to talk about your dear wife?
Dear Joan.
She is really quite incredible. I know her story pretty well, but not everyone might know her story. And how did you guys meet? And just know, if I can just share that when pro-lifers around the country, if not around the world, heard that you guys were getting married, we were pretty amazed. And it was like, thank you, Jesus. It was so exciting to hear that.
Well, you're one of those many men who knew my wife before I did, and your whole family did, Bishop Coffey. She always spoke highly of your whole family, and it's been an honor to meet you and others. So Joan, her maiden name was Andrews, Joan Andrews. So I first heard of her the first time I went to the March for Life. Believe it or not, I didn't go until after I opened up our first home in 1985. So I think it was in January of 86. I went down to that cold Washington, D.C., and I got a flyer, and it said, pray for Joan Andrews in prison in Florida and call the governor to release her. And I could not, as they say, wrap my mind around how could this obviously prayerful, peaceful woman be imprisoned for trying to stop an abortion. And what I found out is that she would and continues to go into an abortuary peacefully and prayerfully. And today she might carry a rose with information tied to the rose on how a woman could get help at a pro-life pregnancy center, and hand that rose to the woman, talk to the woman saying, you don't have to be here. And she would sit down to try to stop the abortionist from committing more abortions. Right. And they called the police. She often did not do this alone. So police would come, they ask you to leave. If you don't leave, then they finally drag you out. And the reason they drag you out is, as Joan says, we don't want to leave until we know that the babies are safe. But if you're saying the abortionist is not going to leave, we're going to stay here. And it's nonviolent completely. She's never hurt anybody. She has been mistreated many, many times. So she was in prison in Florida. I started to call the governor's office like many other pro-lifers did, was praying for her. And then at a New Jersey Right to Life convention, her sister attended a talk I gave on starting a maternity home. And Susan said, would you ever visit my sister in prison? I said, well, I've heard of her. I've been praying for her, but I don't go to Florida that often. She said, well, they just extradited her to Delaware so she could be closer to me. And I don't know how long she'll be up here, but, I could arrange for you to visit. So I said, fine, what do I bring her? Do you want me to bring her a Bible or, a cake with a file in it? Or and I was a Eucharistic minister at the time. And she said, well, if you can bring the Blessed Sacrament, that would be great. She doesn't receive communion often. Well, Bishop Coffey, you got to forgive me for what I did. I asked the pastor, could I bring communion? He said, fine, but I didn't own a Pix. So he just said, being the good practical pastor, I said, just use the corporal. So I put our Lord in the corporal, the altar cloth in my pocket. But what I realized later is that got me through the metal detector, because they probably would have allowed me to bring our Lord in.
God provided.
He did. And then I met Joan in this very little room, like 8 by 10. And there was seats all around the wall with 2 guards at the door where I entered. And the seats had, a prisoner and her visitor, because it was a women's prison. So Joan and I were at the direct back, and I said, I have our Lord, would you like to receive? And she said, that's wonderful. That's great. But if the guards see you give me something in the mouth, they will assume it's drugs and arrest you. I said, thank you. She said, don't worry. At the end, when everybody gets up, I'll kneel down and receive. And I'm thinking, oh, they're not going to see this woman hit the floor. But I said, all right, God, you got me this far. So we talked. That was our first meeting. And at the end, the angels must have blinded the guards, because I gave her Holy Communion and I walked out a free man. But I realized then how special she is, and how joyful she was, not at being in prison, but about being able to share the Lord with other women inmates, to be able to talk to the pregnant women. And many times, and many times since, she's taught pregnant women not only out of not having an abortion because they're in prison, but also effecting adoptions, which has been an amazing feat. And how God provides, wherever God puts you, if you're open to what he wants you to do, good will always come of it. And how many times we've seen this with the saints in prison, not only converting people, but growing in sanctity, like Maximilian Kolbe, dying in Auschwitz, but being such a great witness to everybody around him and now to the whole world. So, that's probably the message Father Benedict would share. You don't have to do a lot of penance, but accept what happens to you in a penitential way, offer it up, and just try to do the next good thing. And when you fall down,
after you got married, you were able to adopt a few children.
So because to condense that story, and I appreciate you moving it along. So she was released later that year, and then it took me 4 years. I'm a little slow here, to propose to her. And because she was a bit older, I was older, she prayed and told everybody, we don't want any wedding gifts. We just want you to pray we have many children. And God blessed us with our first daughter by birth, 11 months after we were married.
Wow.
And then we went on to adopt 6 kids, because we were trying to keep up with her sisters, one who had 8, the other had 12. And they could come quicker that way. We could adopt 2 at a time.
Beautiful.
And, it's really been a great gift. Some of our children have special physical needs, but the reality is they've really taught us a lot more. Again, about God's love and endurance.
And I've met some of those kids, and they're really great people.
Yeah.
And I brag about you two for them and make sure they know what great parents they have, but they know.
Well, they'll tell you the other side of the story, but we're grateful to have them in our lives. And we all feel blessed, Bishop, as you know, Bishop Coffey, coming from.
Chris, we're almost out of time. Can you just tell us what your main needs are? Is it primarily financial needs, or other things people can bring to the homes, or how can people help the most?
Well, yes, financial is a great need. So you can always give at goodcounselhomes.org, COUNSEL, homes with an S at the end of it.org. But we probably need even more good staff, right? Whether you volunteer or you come to work for us. And yes, we do pay a wage, because I'm always out there begging to pay what we can. And we do offer benefits, and we have full-time jobs. And God will reward you tremendously, because the moms will teach you more about yourself than maybe you've ever learned before. And the Lord will expand your heart. If you think you're a loving, compassionate person now, it will grow even more. I'm not saying you're a Grinch, but if you remember how the Grinch's heart grew like 10 times that day when he realized what Christmas was all about. Well, we have every day a Christmas, because the birth of every child, as St. John Paul the Great wrote in the encyclical, The Gospel of Life, the birth of every child is what Christ reminds us of. It's the birth of Christ, the renewal of Christ, the image and likeness of God. So even if you have difficulty with the moms, you know you can love the babies because they are so beautiful and innocent. So if you're interested in working for Good Counsel or volunteering, again, go to goodcounselhomes.org. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, spread the word. The other great need, two things really that everyone has to do now in the United States today, especially. Number one, tell every woman and everybody you know, any woman in a crisis pregnancy can get help, not only at Good Counsel, but throughout the country. Go to our website. You can find maternity homes. There are thousands of pregnancy centers. There are pro-lifers who will give their lives for that mom who's in need today, number one. Number two, everybody who's had an abortion, who's participated in abortion, men, women, whether you've done it directly or indirectly, paid for it, encouraged it, seek God's forgiveness. And for we who know that God forgives, we have to say to everybody around us, because we all know someone who's had an abortion, God forgives. And if that person who had an abortion or is pro-abortion says, it's the best thing I ever did, I can't take that right away from someone, just tell them God forgives. Because I've talked to women in nursing homes who regret their abortion. So you never know when God is going to touch their heart, and they'll need to know, they'll need to remember that God forgives and God loves each and every one of you.
All right, Chris, let me give you and your wife and your kids and your homes a blessing. May Almighty God bless you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. So have a great Advent and a very beautiful Merry Christmas.
Thank you so much, Bishop Coffey, for everything
right.
you're doing. God bless
Take
you.
care.
God bless everybody. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.